Hello and welcome. I am glad you are here with me tonight. This is not going to be a strict history lecture filled with numbers, complicated dates, or events to memorize. Instead, it will be a gentle story, soft enough to help you drift into rest, yet rich enough to paint calming pictures from long ago. Take a quiet moment for yourself now. Allow your shoulders to relax. Take a slow, deep breath in, and let it out gently. With every breath, imagine the weight of your day dissolving, leaving only calm behind. Tonight, we travel back in time 100 years to the decade of the 1920s, a period that the world remembers with a bold name, the Roaring Twenties. When most people hear that phrase, they picture dazzling lights, elegant dresses, the upbeat pulse of jazz music, and nights spent in lively dance halls. These are the images often shown in movies and novels, but the truth is, for the majority of ordinary Americans, life was not so glamorous. Their evenings were quieter, slower, and in many ways, far simpler. That is what we will explore tonight, not the roaring celebrations, but the gentle rhythms of everyday life. These were the moments of home, of rest, of small routines repeated day after day. They may have felt plain at the time, but when we look back, they offer something precious, a steady, calming rhythm, the kind of rhythm that can ease us into sleep. So close your eyes if you wish, and imagine yourself in a small American town in the year 1923. You are sitting in a wooden house with a wide front porch. Outside, the sky is filled with stars, and a soft moonlight rests over the rooftops. You hear crickets chirping in the distance, and the whisper of wind passing gently through the trees. Inside, the glow of an oil lamp fills the room with golden light casting dancing shadows on the walls. Around you, family members settle into chairs. In the corner stands a radio, a new and modern device at the time. From it, a voice hums faintly through the static, reading the day's news or perhaps playing a gentle tune. The family listens quietly, leaning in together, not distracted by screens or constant alerts, but united by the soft sound of a far-off voice. If you listen closely, you can hear the small details, the rustle of newspaper pages being turned, the low murmur of someone sharing a simple story, the light laughter that follows a moment of humor. These are not dramatic sounds. They are ordinary, and precisely because they are ordinary, they feel safe. They soothe, like the rhythm of a lullaby made from daily life. Life in the 1920s followed its own pace. People worked during the day, returned home at dusk, shared a simple dinner, and spent the evening together. Leisure was not filled with flashing lights or endless noise. It was filled with small games of cards, a song played on the piano, quiet conversations, or moments spent reading by lamplight. To modernize, this may seem repetitive, even dull, but it was a kind of repetition that brought comfort. It gave people stability, and tonight, for us, it can bring a sense of calm. Imagine now stepping outside into the town itself. The main street is quiet, with just a few street lamps casting their soft glow. From one window, you hear the slow notes of a piano drifting out into the night. From another, the laughter of children playing before bedtime. Above, the trees move gently in the evening breeze. The world feels safe, still, and unhurried, as if time has slowed down just for you to walk through it peacefully. The 1920s was, of course, a decade of change. Automobiles were appearing more often on the streets. Silent films were filling theaters with laughter and wonder. Radios were being brought into millions of homes. Yet, despite these innovations, the daily rhythm of most lives remains steady. The repetition of simple routines, work, supper, conversation, rest, brought a quiet sense of grounding. And so, as you listen tonight, there is nothing you need to hold on to. You do not have to remember each detail or try to study it as history. This is not a lesson. It is simply a story, a soft collection of scenes, a slow journey through imagination. Let each word drift by you, like ripples across a calm lake, They will not stay, and they do not need to. They simply pass by, leaving you lighter with each moment. In the hours ahead, we will wander together through some of the ways Americans spent their free time in the 1920s. We will sit again in the warm glow of an oil lamp, gathered around the hum of a radio. We will stroll through Sunday parks, where families rested on benches and children played on the grass. We will visit silent movie theaters, where laughter filled the air without a single spoken word. And we will join simple picnics, with nothing more than a blanket, a loaf of bread, and fresh fruit. Each of these scenes will arrive slowly, without urgency, inviting you to relax more deeply. They will not demand your attention. Instead, they will invite your mind to soften, your breath to deepen, and your body to rest. And now, as your thoughts grow lighter, as your breath finds its steady rhythm, let us begin this story, how ordinary Americans truly spent their free time in the 1920s. Not in glamour or spectacle, but in the gentle hours of everyday life, quiet, familiar, and soothing, perfect for carrying you, step by step, closer to sleep. And so, as the story unfolds, we find ourselves stepping quietly into the gentle evenings of the 1920s. The day's work has ended, the fields are empty, the shops are closed, and the streets grow still. Inside the home, the soft glow of an oil lamp fills the room with warmth. The flame flickers slowly, creating moving shadows that sway across the walls. Families of the 1920s often gathered here, in this glow. They did not rush. There was no constant buzz of machines, no glowing screens to demand attention. Instead, there was presence, a father reading from the day's newspaper, his voice steady and calm. A mother sewing quietly in the corner, the sound of threads slipping through fabric soft and rhythmic. Children leaning close, curious and restless, waiting for a story or a laugh. Soon, attention turns to the new centerpiece of the living room, the radio. It was still a fresh invention then, mysterious and magical. The wooden box crackles with static, and then, suddenly, a voice appears as if carried from far away, across invisible airwaves. Families leaned in, marveling at how sound could travel through the air and arrive right into their home. Some nights it was the news, slow words read by an announcer, telling of events beyond the town. Other nights it was music, a soft violin, or perhaps a small jazz band playing a gentle tune. The sound was not always clear. The static sometimes interrupted, fading in and out, but that only added to the wonder. It was as if the air itself was alive, whispering stories and songs into the quiet home. Imagine the children sitting close, their eyes wide, as they listened to voices from places they had never seen. Imagine the parents exchanging glances of amazement, still surprised by the marvel of technology. For them, the radio was not background noise. It was an event, something to gather around, something to share. Yet there was also stillness. When the radio fell silent, the home returned to the sounds of ordinary life, the tick of a clock, the crackle of the lamp's flame, the faint creak of the wooden floor as someone shifted in their chair. These small sounds, so ordinary, became the soundtrack of the evening. On some nights, instead of the radio, families simply told stories aloud. A parent might share a tale from their own childhood, or retell a well-loved folk story. Children laughed at familiar parts, or whispered questions about details they had never noticed before. Storytelling was a thread, weaving family members closer together, reminding them of where they had come from, and preparing them gently for the future. In those moments, time felt slower. There was no rush to check messages, no urgent call to hurry. The evening stretched softly, like a long sigh at the end of the day. Everyone present could simply be. And as the night deepened, lamps would dim, conversations would quiet, and one by one, family members drifted toward rest. The final sounds of the evening were soft ones, the closing of a book, the gentle clink of a lamp being turned down, the shuffle of footsteps on the wooden floor. Outside, the world was silent. Inside, the home was safe, calm, and still. That was how countless Americans spent their evenings in the 1920s, not with the noise and glitter that history sometimes shows us, but with simple togetherness, soft light, and the gentle wonder of a radio's distant voice. After the radio has gone silent, or perhaps on evenings when no broadcast reaches the home, families in the 1920s often turned to one another for entertainment. Their time together was not filled with noise or dazzling activity, but with simple games and shared moments. Picture a wooden table in the center of a small living room. The lamp glows faintly above it. Around the table, family members gather, leaning in with relaxed smiles. Perhaps a deck of cards is shuffled, the soft rustling sound breaking the quiet. Or maybe a small board game is set out, the pieces simple but full of meaning to those who play. Children giggle as they take their turns, their laughter carrying gently through the room. Parents watch with amusement, offering a kind smile or a patient explanation of the rules. Sometimes the game lasted only a few minutes, other times it stretched into the night, but always it was about togetherness, not competition. Music was another gentle companion. Many homes had a piano in the corner, or perhaps a violin tucked away in its case. On quiet evenings, someone might sit down to play a soft tune. It did not have to be perfect. A melody, even if halting or uneven, could fill the air with warmth. The family listened, humming softly along, letting the music blend with the rhythm of the night. For children, even the simplest amusements could be magical. A wooden toy soldier marching across the floor, a doll dressed in handmade clothes, a picture book with pages turning slowly beneath small hands. These quiet pastimes needed no electricity, no noise, no crowd, just imagination and the comfort of home. As the games wound down, conversation often filled the space. Families spoke about their day, the work in the fields, the chores in the house, the news from neighbors. They spoke not quickly, but slowly, in voices soft enough to match the calm of the evening. Sometimes silence stretched between words, and that silence was not empty. It was peaceful, a reminder that being together did not always require talking. And when the night grew later, the routines unfolded with gentle familiarity. Children were guided to their beds, blankets tucked carefully around them. Parents reminded them of tomorrow's chores or offered a quiet good night. In the kitchen, dishes were placed neatly away. The lamp was lowered, its glow fading gradually into shadow. It was in these quiet rituals, games, stories, soft music, simple conversation that families of the 1920s found comfort. They did not need grand diversions or constant excitement. They found peace in repetition, in the ordinary flow of an evening that ended much as it had the night before. And for us, listening now, imagining these scenes across a century, the very simplicity of those nights can be soothing. Slow games, gentle laughter, a piano's hesitant melody, the quiet hum of family life, steady and calm, carrying everyone softly toward sleep. As the week came to a close, Sunday often brought with it a special kind of calm. For many American families in the 1920s, it was the one day when work slowed down, when routines softened, and when free time truly belonged to them. After the morning hours, families would often step outside their homes and head toward the town park. Imagine the scene, a gentle afternoon sun spilling through the branches of tall trees, the air carrying the scent of grass freshly cut, and the sound of footsteps on gravel paths echoing softly. Children ran ahead, their laughter filling the open air, while parents followed at a slower pace, enjoying the rhythm of the walk. Elderly couples often found a shaded bench where they could sit side by side, talking quietly or simply observing the life of the park unfolding before them. These were not hurried outings. They were slow, deliberate, and deeply restorative. For many, the park was the heart of the community. Musicians sometimes gathered there, playing light tunes on violins or brass instruments. On special occasions, a small bandstand might host a Sunday performance, with families gathering on the grass to listen. The music floated through the warm air, weaving itself into conversations, laughter, and silence. Young people enjoyed these afternoons as well. For them, the park was a place to meet friends, to exchange stories, to stroll slowly and share dreams of the future. There was no rush, no loud noise, only the steady rhythm of footsteps and voices blending with the gentle sounds of nature. Picnics were a favorite activity. A blanket spread over soft grass, a basket opened to reveal bread, fruit, and perhaps lemonade. Families shared their simple meals while enjoying the warmth of the sun. There was something deeply satisfying in eating outdoors, with nothing but trees above and the open sky surrounding them. Children, after eating, often returned to their games, rolling hoops, chasing one another, or exploring the corners of the park. Parents watched, content to let the afternoon drift by. Each small sound, the rustle of leaves, the call of a bird, the laughter of children, became part of a gentle symphony of ordinary life. And as the sun began to lower in the sky, families slowly gathered their belongings. The blanket was folded, the basket closed, and the path home awaited. Tired children leaned against their parents, their energies spent, their eyes already heavy with sleep. The walk back was unhurried, the fading light wrapping the town in a golden glow. In these Sunday strolls and these simple moments outdoors, Americans of the 1920s found both connection and calm. It was not a grand adventure. It was not a dazzling spectacle. It was something quieter, something gentler, a way of pressing pause on the week, of breathing deeply, of letting life move at a softer pace. For us, imagining it now, the image is like a lullaby for the mind. The sound of footsteps on park paths, the hush of wind through the trees, the steady rhythm of families moving slowly together. A century has passed, but the comfort of that simplicity still lingers, carrying us closer to rest. As the weekend unfolded, another favorite pastime awaited many Americans, a visit to the silent movie theater. For families and communities in the 1920s, this was more than entertainment. It was a small adventure, a chance to step into another world without ever leaving town. Imagine walking through the doors of a modest theater, the air carrying the scent of popcorn and dust from velvet curtains. Wooden seats creak softly as people settle in, their voices hushed with anticipation. The lights dim, and suddenly the room falls quiet. All eyes turn to the glowing screen. The film begins. There are no voices, no recorded dialogue, only black and white images flickering, full of motion and expression. On many nights, a pianist sits at the front of the theater, hands moving gently over the keys, filling the silence with a melody that guides every scene. The music rises and falls, matching the laughter, the suspense, the wonder of the story unfolding. One evening might bring the slapstick humor of Charlie Chaplin, his clumsy charm drawing waves of laughter from the audience. Another evening might feature a daring adventure, with heroes climbing mountains or crossing seas. The crowd gasps, leans forward, then relaxes again as the story continues. What made these nights special was not only the films themselves, but the feeling of sharing them. Neighbors, friends, families, all gathered together in the same space, experiencing the same laughter, the same surprise, the same delight. In small towns, the theater was a gathering place, a thread that connected the community through stories told without words. For children, the screen was a window into worlds they had never seen. For adults, it was a rare chance to pause, to let imagination carry them away from daily routines. And for everyone, the experience was gentle, simple, and unforgettable. When the film ended, the lights rose slowly, and the audience stirred back into the night. People stepped out into the cool air, still smiling, still replaying the images in their minds. The walk home was often filled with quiet chatter, as families recalled their favorite scenes or laughed once more at a funny moment. The magic of silent movies was not in their grandeur, but in their simplicity. Without sound, viewers filled in the gaps with their own imagination. Without color, they painted the scenes with their own minds. And in that act of imagining, the audience became part of the story. Tonight, as we think of those small theaters, we can almost hear the faint piano, the gentle laughter, the rustle of seats as people leaned closer to the screen. It is a picture of calm joy, a moment in history, both ordinary and extraordinary. And like the steady rhythm of a lullaby, it reminds us how even the simplest entertainments, shadows of light on a wall, music drifting through the dark, can bring comfort, togetherness, and peace. When the weather was kind, families and friends in the 1920s often chose to spend their free time outdoors, gathering for something as simple and comforting as a picnic. These afternoons were not elaborate. They were quiet, gentle pauses in the flow of life, where food, nature, and companionship blended into a peaceful memory. Picture a grassy meadow at the edge of a small town. A soft breeze moves through the tall grass, carrying with it the scent of earth and flowers. Families arrive with baskets in hand, their steps unhurried. A blanket is spread out upon the ground, and soon the contents of the basket are revealed. There is bread, baked fresh that morning, its crust golden and fragrant. Apples and pears, their skins shining in the sun. A jar of homemade lemonade, cool and refreshing. Perhaps a few slices of cheese or a piece of cake, saved for this moment. The food is not extravagant, but it is enough, simple, nourishing, and best of all, shared. Children laugh as they run through the open field, chasing one another or rolling in the grass. Their voices rise and fall like the song of birds. Parents sit back on the blanket, talking quietly, or simply closing their eyes to feel the warmth of the sun. A gentle rhythm fills the air, soft conversations, the crunch of bread, the clink of glasses, the sigh of the wind. Sometimes games followed the meal. A ball tossed across the meadow, a hoop rolled along the dirt path, or a quiet round of cards played upon the blanket. These were small amusements, requiring little more than imagination, and the joy of being together. The beauty of these picnics lay not in what was eaten, but in the slowness of the moment. There was no rush to finish, no pressing need to move on. Time seemed to stretch, as though the afternoon itself wanted to linger. Each bite, each sip, each laugh carried with it a sense of ease. As the day wore on, the sun lowered gently, painting the meadow in shades of gold. Shadows grew longer, the air cooler. Families began to gather their things, folding the blanket, tucking away the empty basket. Children, now tired from play, leaned against their parents, their eyes heavy with sleepiness. The walk back home was calm and slow, the glow of sunset guiding each step. In these simple outings, people of the 1920s found joy. It was not about spectacle. It was not about display. It was about pausing in the midst of life's routines, to share a meal, to laugh in the open air, to remember the sweetness of simplicity. And as we imagine it now, these picnics become like a gentle memory within us. Warm sun, soft grass, laughter in the distance. A reminder that peace can be found in the smallest of gatherings, and that sometimes the quietest pleasures are the ones that remain with us the longest. As evening fell on weekends, a different kind of rhythm began to stir among the younger generation. For many young people in the 1920s, free time meant music and movement dancing to melodies that carried both excitement and joy. In the cities, the sounds of jazz floated out from bright dance halls and small clubs. A piano tapped out playful notes, joined by the steady beat of drums and the gentle sway of a saxophone. Inside, young men and women filled the floor, their shoes gliding quickly across polished wood. Laughter mingled with the music. Voices rose above the rhythm, and the energy of youth seemed to light up the night. For many, this was a kind of freedom. The 1920s were years of change, and jazz became the soundtrack of a new generation. The dances were quick, lively, and full of expression. They did not demand elegance or formality. They invited joy, spontaneity, and the thrill of being young. But beyond the cities, in smaller towns and rural communities, the picture was gentler. Instead of glittering dance halls, young people often gathered in community centers, barns, or church halls. The music might come from a single violin, an accordion, or a harmonica. The dances were simple, traditional, and familiar circling steps, hand-in-hand movements, rhythms passed down through generations. There was less noise, less dazzle, but the feeling was much the same: companionship, connection, and the delight of moving together. In the glow of lantern light, with wooden floors beneath their feet, these gatherings offered warmth and belonging. Sometimes a harvest dance marked the change of seasons. Sometimes a holiday brought neighbors together to share music and step in time. No matter the reason, the dance was a moment when worries faded, when the world seemed lighter, and when laughter carried into the night air. For the youth of the 1920s, dancing, whether to jazz in the city or folk tunes in the countryside, was more than just pastime. It was a way of celebrating life, of creating memories, of weaving joy into the fabric of ordinary days. And now, as we imagine it from afar, we hear the faint echo of those rhythms, the soft shuffle of shoes, the rise of a fiddle, the playful call of a trumpet. They become part of the lullaby of the past, gentle reminders that joy need not be grand to be felt deeply. The music softens, the steps slow, and once again, the night returns to stillness, just as it did 100 years ago. Not every evening in the 1920s was filled with music or dancing. For many people, free time meant something quieter, something slower: a book resting in the hands, a magazine spread open on the table, or a newspaper folded neatly beside a lamp. Reading was a beloved pastime, and one that suited the calm of night. Imagine a small living room, its corners softened by lamplight. A father leans back in his chair, glasses perched on his nose, reading the latest headlines. A mother turns the pages of a magazine, pausing at photographs that seem to open windows into the wider world. Children sit cross-legged on the rug, their eyes following the adventures of characters in picture books or simple stories. The act of reading was not rushed. Each page turned slowly, each sentence absorbed with patience. The silence of the room was filled only with the faint rustle of paper and the steady sound of breathing. Sometimes a passage was read aloud, shared with the family. Other times, the story stayed quietly within, carried into dreams at the end of the night. Books and magazines were more accessible than ever. Cheap paperbacks offered detective tales, romances, and adventures that carried readers far from their everyday lives. Illustrated magazines brought images of fashion, travel, and new inventions, sparking curiosity and conversation. For children, comic strips and picture books provided both joy and imagination. Even those with little time or money found comfort in words. A borrowed book, a shared newspaper, or a hand-me-down magazine could fill an evening with wonder. Reading required no special equipment, no great expense, only light, attention, and the desire to be carried elsewhere. Sometimes reading became a ritual, Parents tuck children into bed with a story, their voices steady and soothing, carrying young minds into sleep. Other nights, adults lingered over a few final pages before setting the book aside, closing their eyes, and letting the day drift away. There was a stillness in these moments, a rhythm of calm. The world outside might have been noisy, changing, full of movement, but inside the home, words on paper created a refuge. Stories stretched across oceans and decades, yet they rested gently in the hands of ordinary readers. As we think of those evenings now, we can almost hear the turning of pages, the faint scratch of a pencil marking a note in the margin, the deep sigh of someone closing a book with quiet satisfaction. These small sounds form their own lullaby, steady, calming, timeless, and in that steady rhythm, both then and now, we are reminded how words can cradle us, how stories can soothe us, and how reading, in its simplest form, can bring peace at the close of the day. When the air was warm and the evenings long, many American families of the 1920s stepped outside their homes and settled onto the front porch. The porch was more than just part of the house. It was a bridge between the private world inside and the community outside. Picture a wooden swing creaking softly as it sways back and forth. A row of chairs lined neatly along the porch. The glow of lanterns spilling onto the steps. Neighbors passed by on their evening walks, exchanging nods and greetings. It was a scene repeated across countless small towns, calm and unhurried. Families gathered here after supper, sipping tea or lemonade. Parents leaned back in their chairs, enjoying the coolness of the night air. Children played quietly nearby, their laughter fading as darkness deepened, and as the stars emerged one by one above, conversation began to flow. The topics were often simple: news of the day, events at the church, a neighbor's garden, the weather that would shape tomorrow's work. There was no rush, no need to fill every silence. Words rose and fell like the sound of crickets in the grass, steady and soothing. Sometimes stories stretched further memories from childhood, tales of travel, or old family legends passed down through generations. The porch became a stage for storytelling, where voices carried softly into the night, blending with the hum of insects and the gentle stir of leaves. Other times, silence itself was enough. Couples sat side by side, saying little, simply watching the street grow darker, listening to the world quiet around them. The porch gave space for both words and stillness, for connection and for rest. And as the evening deepened, lanterns flickered lower, rocking chairs slowed their rhythm, and neighbors returned to their homes. The streets emptied, the night wrapped itself around the town, and the last sounds of conversation faded gently into silence. In these moments, Americans of the 1920s found something deeply human: the comfort of presence, the peace of shared time, and the reassurance of knowing they were not alone. Tonight, as we picture these porches, we can almost feel the soft wooden boards beneath our feet, the sway of the chair, the hush of voices beneath a star-filled sky. It is a scene as timeless as it is soothing, carrying us further into calm and closer to rest. Not every home in the 1920s could afford to visit a jazz club or a grand concert hall. Yet music still found its way into daily life, weaving itself quietly into evenings, softening the edges of the day. Picture a small living room, the glow of an oil lamp resting against the wall. A father lifts a harmonica to his lips, sending out a melody both simple and sweet. The notes drift gently through the room, rising and falling with the rhythm of his breath. Children hum along, their voices light and playful, while a mother smiles quietly, rocking in her chair to the sound. In another home, a fiddle is tuned, its strings stretched and ready. The bow moves slowly across the wood, releasing a tune that is both rustic and familiar. The music does not need to be perfect. It only needs to fill the air, to wrap the family in comfort. The sound mingles with the tick of a clock, the sigh of wind at the window, the quiet laughter of those listening. For some families, the radio provided a gateway to music beyond their own walls. A soft crackle, a burst of static, and then suddenly a piano or a small orchestra carried through the air. People leaned closer, marveling that songs could travel unseen, carried by invisible waves. They listened not only with their ears but with their hearts, amazed at this new connection to a wider world. Young people found joy in singing together, sometimes gathering on porches or in barns, letting their voices rise into the open night. A folk song passed from memory, a hymn known by heart, or a new tune learned from the radio, each carried with it the power to unite. Music was not about performance. It was about presence. It was about creating a sound that filled the quiet, about sharing something that lingered, even after the last note faded. In towns both large and small, across homes humble and grand, music reminded people of joy, of rhythm, of connection. And when the instruments were put away, when the radio was turned off, when voices grew tired, the echoes remained, soft, steady, fading slowly into silence, like a lullaby carrying the household gently toward rest. Tonight, as we listen from afar, we can almost hear those notes again, the hum of a harmonica, the sweetness of a fiddle, the faint crackle of a radio carrying distant song. They become part of our own quiet now, guiding us deeper into calm and closer to sleep. Beneath the headlines and beyond the glittering images of the 1920s, there was another kind of life. The ordinary rhythm lived quietly by millions of people each day. It was not dramatic, it was not dazzling, but it was steady, familiar, and deeply human. Imagine the start of a typical day. The sun rises slowly over fields or rooftops. People wake early, ready to begin their work on farms, in factories, in small shops that line the streets of towns. The hours pass with labor, with chores, with the simple routines that sustain life, and when the work is done, the heart turns toward home. Evenings carried a dependable rhythm. Families gathered for supper, the table set with simple foods, bread, vegetables, perhaps meat if it was available. The meal was not extravagant, but it was shared. Conversation wove its way around the table, voices rising and falling in familiar patterns. Laughter might come at a child's story. A quiet pause might follow a parent's reflection on the day. After supper, the night unfolded slowly. Some evenings held games, others held music. Still, others were filled with reading or quiet talk on the porch. There was no need to rush. The hours of free time were few but precious, a gentle balance after the demands of the day. By nightfall, routines turned toward rest. Children were guided to bed, tucked in with care, sometimes lulled by a story spoken in a soft voice. Adults lingered a little longer, perhaps finishing a chore, perhaps sitting in silence, letting the day drift away. Lamps were lowered, windows were closed, the house grew still. This ordinariness, this repetition, was not dull to those who lived it. It was reassuring. It was the rhythm of life, one day flowing into the next, creating a sense of safety and continuity. In the midst of change and progress, these routines anchored people to something steady, something lasting. From our distance now, a century later, these small patterns may seem quiet, almost too quiet compared to the noise of modern life. But in their calm, there is comfort. In their steadiness, there is peace. And for us, imagining them now, they become like a lullaby of the past. Steady work, shared meals, gentle talk, early nights. The 1920s may be remembered as an era of motion and music, but at its heart, it was also an era of ordinary evenings, ordinary in the best sense of the word. Calm, familiar, safe, a reminder that sometimes the simplest routines are the ones that bring the most rest. And so we have reached the end of our quiet journey through the Roaring Twenties, not through its glamour or its noise, but through its gentleness, its ordinary rhythms, and its soft, steady evenings. Together, we have wandered through homes lit by oil lamps, where radios whispered through static, bringing voices from far away. We have gathered at tables where simple games brought laughter, where stories were shared, and where silence itself carried comfort. We have strolled through Sunday parks, listened to music drifting across bandstands, and rested on blankets spread across meadows. We have stepped into theaters filled with flickering light, heard the joy of a piano guiding silent films, and felt the warmth of laughter ripple through a crowd. We have joined young people in their dances, sometimes to the lively pulse of jazz in the city, sometimes to the humble tune of a fiddle in a barn. We have opened books and turned pages slowly, letting words carry us far away, while lamps glowed softly beside us. We have sat upon porches, watching the stars rise, sharing stories with neighbors, or simply resting in silence. We have listened to harmonicas and fiddles, to voices singing together under the night sky, to radios carrying gentle music into small rooms, and at the center of it all, we have found the ordinary, the steady rhythm of everyday life. Work, supper, small talk, and early nights. Nothing grand, nothing loud, just the calm patterns of life lived slowly, simply, and together. These are the lullabies of the past, not sung with words, but carried in the ordinary sounds of life, the rustle of pages, the creak of a rocking chair, the laughter of children, the murmur of voices, fading into night. As you rest here now, you may imagine yourself stepping into one of those scenes. Perhaps you are seated on a porch, a soft breeze brushing your face, the wooden boards beneath your feet warm from the day's sun. Perhaps you are lying on a picnic blanket, the sky above wide and endless, the sound of children laughing faintly in the distance. Or perhaps you are inside a quiet home, the glow of a lamp steady, a book resting gently in your lap. Wherever you choose to be, allow yourself to linger there. Let the calm of that time surround you, like a blanket drawn close. Let it steady your breath, soften your thoughts, and ease the weight of the day. The 1920s may feel far away, but the peace of those nights remains close. Because peace is timeless. The glow of a lamp, the hush of voices, the rhythm of footsteps fading into stillness, these belong not only to the past, but to us, here and now. So let the story fall quiet. Let the images grow softer, like lantern light fading at the close of night. Let yourself sink into rest, carried gently on the calm of ordinary lives lived long ago. You do not need to hold on to anything more. You do not need to search for another thought. You are safe, you are calm, you are here. And now, as you drift deeper into sleep, I leave you with this wish. May your night be peaceful. May your dreams be kind. May your rest be deep and nourishing. And may you wake with lightness in your heart. Good night, dear listener. Sleep well. Crescent Moon Sparkles.